Right now, you're wearing something. Maybe it's a shirt, maybe it's a jacket, maybe it's whatever you grabbed off the floor this morning without thinking. You didn't make it. You didn't have to. You just put it on and went about your day. Now imagine standing on an open plain in East Africa 2 million years ago. No shirt, no jacket, nothing, just skin. And that wasn't a problem, because for most of human history, clothes didn't exist, and your ancestors were completely fine. So when did that change? And what exactly happened in the gap between naked and dressed that almost ended us entirely? Let's start with something that sounds wrong, but isn't. Humans are one of the only large mammals on Earth with almost no body hair. Gorillas have it, chimps have it, every other primate has it. We don't. And that's strange, because body hair is useful. It insulates, it protects skin from the sun, it reduces friction. Evolution doesn't usually strip away something useful unless something more useful takes its place. So why did we lose it? The leading theory comes from sweat. About 2 million years ago, early humans began spending more time in open grasslands chasing prey, and in open grassland under a direct African sun, overheating kills you faster than almost anything else. Hair traps heat. So gradually, over hundreds of thousands of years, we lost it. We traded fur for sweat glands, roughly 2 to 5 million of them covering almost every inch of our bodies. No other primate sweats like we do, and that one biological trade-off turned us into the greatest endurance hunters on Earth. We could chase animals for hours in the midday heat that would kill everything else. But here's the thing nobody mentions. Losing your hair in Africa is survivable. Losing your hair and then walking into Europe during an ice age is not. And that's exactly what we did. Around 70,000 years ago, modern humans began migrating out of Africa, north, into colder climates, into seasons, into winter. And a hairless body built for savanna heat is about as prepared for a European winter as a goldfish is for a foot race. Without insulation, the human body starts losing core temperature fast. Exposed skin in freezing wind pulls heat away in minutes. Your fingers stop working. Then your judgment goes. Then your heart. A healthy adult in wet cold with no protection can die in under 3 hours. So either humans found a solution or you wouldn't be here reading this. The solution was wearing someone else's skin. The oldest direct evidence of animal skin use for warmth comes from cut marks. Archaeologists studying animal bones from sites across Africa and Europe found specific patterns of cuts that only make sense if someone was skinning the animal carefully, preserving the hide in one piece rather than just tearing into it for meat. At a site in Germany, bear bones from 300,000 years ago show cut marks at the paws and around the skull, exactly where you'd cut if you were trying to pull the skin off clean without damaging it. That's not butchering, that's tailoring. Someone wanted the whole pelt. Someone understood that the thing keeping the bear warm could keep them warm too. But here's what most people don't realize. A loose animal skin thrown over your shoulders isn't clothing. It's a blanket with arms. It leaks heat through every gap. It soaks through in rain. It stiffens and cracks as it dries. Wearing a skin and wearing clothes are two completely different technologies, and the gap between them came down to a single invention so small it's almost insulting: the sewing needle. The earliest bone needles found so far date to around 50,000 years ago in Siberia, though some researchers push that date back further. They're tiny, an inch or two long, sharpened to a point, with a hole drilled through one end for thread made from sinew or plant fiber. That's it. That's the invention. But what it allowed was completely different from anything that came before. Fitted clothing, sealed seams. A sleeve that closes at the wrist means warm air stays inside. A boot that wraps the ankle means snow stays outside. The difference between a loose hide and a sewn garment in a blizzard isn't comfort, it's survival. Researchers who study cold weather physiology estimate that properly fitted layered clothing can reduce heat loss by up to 90% compared to bare skin. A needle and thread is the difference between living and dying. And we know early humans understood this because of where we find evidence of sewing. Siberia, the Arctic Circle, places so cold that nothing without serious insulation survives long. Humans showed up in these places and stayed, which means they arrived prepared. They didn't figure out clothes after getting there. They had the technology before they needed it. But the story of clothing isn't just survival, it's identity. Archaeologists have found something interesting alongside the needles and hides. Pigment. Red ochre, a naturally occurring iron compound used to color things. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, ochre was being processed and used at least 100,000 years ago. At sites across Europe and Asia, pigment shows up alongside bone needles, shells used as beads, animal teeth with holes drilled for stringing. These weren't tools for staying warm. They were tools for looking a certain way, for signaling something about who you are. And here's the part that changes how you see the whole story. The moment humans started decorating their bodies, something else started too. Group identity. If your clothing looks different from mine, we're from different groups. Different groups have different rules, different alliances, different dangers. Clothing stopped being just insulation and became a language. What you wore said where you were from, what your status was, whether you were a threat or an ally. Something that started as survival became communication, and that shift happened fast. By 30,000 years ago, humans across 3 separate continents were producing clothing with deliberate design. Not just functional, but decorated, sewn with specific patterns, colored with pigments, layered in ways that served no thermal purpose but clearly served a social one. We didn't just learn to dress, we learned to dress for each other. Now, here's where it gets strange. We have almost no direct clothing from this period because fabric and hide decompose. A 30,000-year-old spear survives. A 30,000-year-old shirt doesn't. So most of what we know comes from indirect evidence. Needles, pigments, beads that would have been sewn onto garments, figurines carved from ivory that show humans wearing what appear to be fitted hoods and layered upper body coverings. There's one figurine from Siberia, the Malta figurine, that clearly depicts a person in what looks like a sewn, hooded suit, carved 24,000 years ago. Whoever made it lived in one of the coldest places on Earth and was wearing what looks like a modern parka. They understood insulation. They understood design. They were solving the exact same problem a North Face jacket solves today, just with bone needles and mammoth hide. And then there's the lice. This sounds like a detour, but it isn't. Humans have 2 types of body lice. Head lice, which live in hair, and clothing lice, which live in fabric. Clothing lice evolved from head lice at some point after humans started wearing clothes. By analyzing the genetic difference between the 2 species and calculating how long that mutation would take to accumulate, scientists were able to estimate when clothing first appeared. The answer came out to somewhere between 83,000 and 170,000 years ago, which is earlier than the oldest needles we've found. Which means the first clothes probably weren't sewn at all. They were just wrapped, tied, held in place. Functional enough to create a new habitat for a parasite to evolve into. Clothes are old enough that something evolved specifically to live in them. That's how long we've been doing this. So here's the full picture. 2 million years ago, we lost our hair to become better hunters. That made us fast, endurance, unstoppable in heat, and completely exposed in cold. So somewhere between 100,000 and 170,000 years ago, we started covering ourselves in the skins of animals we killed. Then we invented the needle and turned loose hides into fitted insulation. Then we started decorating what we wore and turned survival gear into social identity. Then we spread across the entire planet, from the equator to the Arctic, and clothing is a big part of what made that possible. You didn't just inherit your ancestors' DNA. You inherited their invention. Every coat, every boot, every thread that keeps you warm right now is a version of a solution that a person without a last name figured out in the dark with a bone needle and a piece of sinew. They didn't have stores. They didn't have machines. They had a dead animal, a sharp piece of bone, and a problem that would kill them if they didn't solve it. And they solved it. You're the proof.